Hello everybody, it's Mo on the go. Woo! How are you today? Today we have a very serious topic. But before we get into the topic on unemployment, woo, come on guys, let's do some music, something to lift our spirits. All right. Tayo magai monyobi ninyonete wenga moro dawire ya mwene hinya nabolayo kayora ngoroine tayo magai monyobi madena moka barashera anitara na moko wake What this song is talking about, guys, is it's talking about the beauty and the strength of our Creator. That he is attesting to the fact. This is a gentleman by the name of Philip Kimani, who is one of my favorite musicians, Kenyan musicians. And it's a gospel song, but it's really a very encouraging and motivational song. It's talking about I have seen that you have a lot of strength, and you shelter me under your arms. He's talking to the Creator. You could talk to your Creator, that your Creator will shelter you under your arms, that He has a lot of strength. Okay, that He carries you like a baby and rocks you in His arms when the going gets tough and the fight is too much for you. He will carry you in His arms and hold you and rest you in His love. You know, it's very important that we actually remember the promises of our Creator. Okay, whether you're coming from a Christian, Islamic, Buddhist, Hindu, traditional African, we all are worshippers. And we know that there is a higher power. And if you don't believe there's a higher power, this is not for you. But I do believe that there's a higher power that determines our life course as we continue our journey through life, because we are all sojourners in this life. Sometimes we have to face some real difficulties and challenges. And this time, some of the challenges that we're facing nowadays are very, very serious. They've got to do with our livelihood, that are threats, things that are threats to our livelihood. And there's nothing worse and more worrisome than having to lose your job, especially with short notice. Well, I've been doing my research on this issue, and I wanted to approach it from two ways, guys. I live in the UK, and the reason I live in the UK part of the time is because, first of all, I do have family here, but also it provides me an opportunity to get away from Kenya, so that I have an opportunity to think and perhaps be in a different culture where I can reflect. This is just, something that I decided to be doing once I stopped working full-time, because I used to work full-time. But now, because I'm kind of like what you call self-employed, if there's anything like that, I decided I'm going to be changing my environments just to enhance my knowledge and enhance my life experience. Okay, so I live partly here and I live partly in Kenya. But I've had the opportunity to take a look and take a look at the statistics and to follow what's the ongoings in Kenya, especially, and in the UK, on job losses and unemployment. Okay, I know many of you guys have lost your jobs. Some of you have seen ladies on YouTube crying and saying, what am I going to feed my child? They just told me today that I've lost my job. Companies, big employers such as Pesa, letting go of young ladies, young single moms, some of them with no income, no alternative income. These are people who have invested a lot of time and money and resources into furthering their education so that they can have employment and they can secure jobs and look after the people that they are supposed to look after. In Africa, we have a very high dependency ratio. That is, the people who are of working age, salary earning age, who are between the ages of 15 to, let's say, about 55, 60 there. Okay, those are the people who would be earning salaries and supporting the pensioners after 60 years old and the young children between 0 and 14, 15 years old. Okay, so we have a very, very high dependency ratio as a Kenyan country, and I think it's something like 72%. Okay, that means that it's a very high dependency ratio. In the UK, that dependency ratio is slightly lower. It's about 52%, and the average global is about 58%. Okay, that is the people who would be who would be dependent on people who are working. Okay, people who would be needing to depend on people who are working or depend on the government for support. Okay, we're looking at 72% in Kenya. That's huge. That's really, really huge. One thing I think we need to look, let's step back a little bit and look at the differences between these two countries, for example. And the reason I talk about them is, yes, it's like comparing apples to oranges. But the first thing people do when they lose their jobs, for example, in Africa, is that they think, well, why don't I relocate? Why don't I go to another country? Let me go to a quote-unquote developed country. And maybe I'll have more opportunities to work there, compared to in Africa. But you need to know a few things. You need to be aware of a few things. Let's do a little bit of a comparison. Let's look at the land area, for example, of the UK. The UK comprises of England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, and the area landmass is about 243,610 kilometers squared. Okay, and in Kenya we have more than double that at 580,367 kilometers squared. So Kenya is like more than twice as big as the UK, area-wise. Area-wise. Can you imagine that, guys? We are twice as big. Yeah? Yet, the density of population will shock you because the UK population is 64 million people. Okay? 64 million people. And in Kenya, what is our population? Something like about 52 million people. 49 to 52 million people. So our population density is very, very, very low compared to the UK. Okay? In Kenya. So the UK has a very, very high population density compared to the UK. The household size density is about 279 kilometers squared. Okay, household size density is 279 kilometers squared, and for Kenya is 279 people per kilometer squared, and in Kenya it's only 92 people per kilometer squared. So you can imagine the congestion in England. There's very high congestion because there's a lot of people here. Yeah, a lot more people here. So imagine you're working with half the land area and you have a much bigger population. Yeah, more than 10%, maybe 20% greater than Kenya. And so you can imagine that's the reason why they build houses on top of one another in this country. They have flats. There's one flat here, a whole house here, and another whole house upstairs. Upstairs houses, by the way. Yeah, this is like having a maisonette downstairs, something we're probably not seeing in Kenya, and another maisonette on top of each other, and they're lined like this, row houses. People live like rabbits in England, okay, in many places. But the thing is that there's very good planning because every community, they always make sure that there's recreational facilities so that people don't lose their minds living like that. It's a very difficult. They call them shoebox houses in England. So do not romanticize the life in Europe because it's actually very, very different from Africa. In Africa, we have land, we have space. We have recreational space. We have our animals don't have to be on leashes and collars. They are very safe, and they can and we are safe because we kind of like have more space. Yeah, isn't that true? Okay. So what else was quite surprising for me was that the median age, this is an older population here in the UK, is about 40 years old. And the average age in Kenya is teenagers, 19-year-old. Okay, so majority of Kenyans are young people, and this is not something that you don't know. You can actually do your research yourself. It's only that I've managed to try to compile the information. Okay, the fertility rate here, okay, number of children per household is approximately 2 in the UK, and in Kenya it's approximately 3. So actually, what's happening in Kenya? It used to be about 4.2. Okay, and that means that it's starting to reduce. Actually, it used to be almost 5, and it's starting to reduce. So actually, in Kenya, our population growth is actually on the low. Okay, so it's actually reducing. So it's not like we have, like what people think, that we have a very big population and it's keeping on growing. It's not. It's not growing in Kenya at all. And we're not overpopulated at all, especially compared to our land area size like people would want us to believe. Sometimes you hear media reports of officials abroad telling Africans that we are overpopulated. But what are you talking about? Look at our land size. Look at our land area size. We are actually underpopulated in Africa. And we're actually underpopulated in Kenya to some extent, considering the land size there. Okay? So another important official statistic you should be aware of is the dependency ratio. I think we mentioned that already. It's about 52% in the UK and 73% as of 2018 figures in Kenya. That's a very high dependency ratio in Kenya, all right? The countries that have the lowest dependency ratios are the countries of the Middle East. Countries such as Qatar, Saudi, those guys have a very low dependency ratio, like next to zero. Okay, and the countries that have the highest dependency ratio are actually Francophone African countries such as Benin, okay, that have a very, very high dependency ratio, something like 101. Or I think Niger, it's countries like Niger, 101 people. So you can imagine the stress, the economic stress and financial stress on those people who are working. The higher the dependency ratio, the more the economic stress on those people who are working. Okay, and the other thing that you need to be aware of is the employment rate. A very important statistic is the employment rate in the UK, which is only at approximately 5%, 4.7%, official figures, okay? And in Kenya, we're looking at 40% of the population is unemployed, according to the UNDP Human Development Index report, okay? So it's something to be concerned about and something not to hide under the carpet. One of the problems with getting unemployment figures, and I'm going to talk about it a bit later, is the source and the purpose and who is behind the figures. So we should not be playing around. Anybody who is really serious about African development, about Kenya's development, needs to identify the source of the data so that they can make provisions for their county. So, for example, the census that just ended the other day, okay, is bringing up a lot of concerns for the governors of these counties, okay? And I'll get into that in a minute. All right. So basically, one of the problems we have right now is the sources of the data. Yes. Let's go through the sources of this data, okay? For example, the National Assembly just recently mentioned a youth employment rate of 55%, which would not be shocking. If you just use your eyes and look outside in Kenya, yeah, you'll see majority of the youth, over 50%, are unemployed, okay? And this a motion was brought on by an MP, Anthony Oloch, MP for Mathare, okay, calling on youth unemployment to be declared a national disaster, which they don't want to do. The government doesn't want to do that because there are other conflicting sources of this data as well, such as the data that comes from the Statistics Bureau. The data that comes from the Statistics Bureau, 2015-2016, the Labor Force Survey, basic report, used a survey asking if people had worked for 1 hour for the last 7 days. So again, how it's defined? How is the unemployment defined? Can you really survive on a salary of just 1 hour, 7 days, within 7 days? Just 1 hour within those 7 days? Yeah? So you have to look at the parameters that they are using, to determine the unemployment rate. Okay, the Human Development Index report cited unemployment at 39.1%, call it about 40%, and the highest in Kenya. Kenya is the highest unemployment amongst the 5 East African countries. That's Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and maybe Ethiopia, The Labor Force Survey, on the other hand, there's another survey. The Labor Force Survey came up with 7.4%, stating that 20% of them are underemployed. Okay? What does underemployment mean? Underemployment means that you are available, those people who are available for employment but cannot find employment. Those are the people who are underemployed, and they call that 20%. But I'll tell you what I learned from statistics is anything above 10% is significant. It's a very significant number. That's why anything that goes over 10%, some 11% and above is high. So if we have something like 39%, 40% from being cited by the Human Development Index, Human Development Index report, then that is an issue that the government needs to take very, very serious. Okay? The Kenya Economic Survey talks about 9.3% unemployment, just under 10. I think probably the reason is because they don't want to make it look significant. But 9% is also high, and that's 2018 figures. Okay? So basically, let me just not scare you. with these statistics, but they're actually quite disturbing and quite worrisome. We know that over the past week, there's been a lot of reports and people protesting in town. We have some people who are protesting, a peaceful protest that was broken up with tear gas in Nairobi, on people saying, on young people determined to make noise and ask for their rights for employment to be considered by the government, okay? Because the high dependency ratio is affecting them. Because if people cannot work, if people are being made redundant by companies in Kenya, it means that those people who are dependent on them have no source of livelihood. They have no food, they have no shelter, they have no health care, yeah? The basic needs of life, they don't have clothes. So it's something that one should consider. And of course, your dignity is always associated with being a productive member of the society, okay, and having an income that is worthwhile. So one of the things that we need to know about is that in addition to the problems that we know of in terms of the high unemployment, we know that high unemployment also brings upon crime. Okay, there's a positive relationship between high unemployment and crime, basic crime. That's why you see a lot of child abuse, you see a lot of theft, burglaries, all kinds of bad behavior amongst young people because of the high unemployment rate. We're looking at 40% unemployment rate, literally. Okay, why would we expect that we would be safe or feeling safe or not have expected crime? And on the other hand, it's quite interesting because it's also gender determined. For example, if there's been studies have shown that there is an inverse relationship, an opposite relationship between high unemployment of men and domestic violence, for example. So when men are unemployed, domestic violence actually reduces because of the power dynamics have changed in this particular case. Okay, one would expect that when men are unemployed, okay, domestic violence goes up. No, actually, it doesn't go up. According to previous studies, it doesn't go up. But when a woman is unemployed, on the other hand, she becomes the one who is dependent on the man. The domestic violence figures have been shown to increase. And that's the reason why countries such as the UK really protect jobs for women. Really try to ensure that women have either an income, a source of income, or have jobs, available. So protection of jobs, women's jobs, is usually tied to crime. Prevention of domestic violence, because the government of the UK spends very, very much money on domestic violence. Okay, and we'll talk about domestic violence at a different time. Okay, because I don't want us to move away from this. But one of the things you need to understand is this: the population census that has just been concluded in August this year. I think it took place in Kenya between August 24th to 31st. In 27, it was called Counting Our People for Sustainable Development and Devolution of Resources. Okay, that's what its theme was. Counting Our People for Sustainable Development and Devolution of Resources. Okay, and it had a lot of independent observers to ensure data quality, to ensure, for example, field supervisors, real-time response. It was the very first survey that was done using mobile technology, so it was really something. It was a big leap, a big technological leap, okay? And so the Kenyan National Bureau of Statistics, if you go to their website, you'll see that data has undergone a validation process. At the moment, the results are being disputed by the governors of some counties who claim that they have been the numbers in their counties have been underreported. And you see, when they have a lower number of population reported, it just means that the amount of monies that are going to be allocated by the government to these regions is going to be lower, right? Yeah, especially for devolution. So everybody has an interest in ensuring that they have the highest population figures in their counties. But you have to ask yourself, what is it that actually either influences high population figures or population density in these countries? What are the push and the pull factors? What are the things that push people out of the villages or that pull them into the villages? Some of the things that push people out of the villages are jobs and wages that are not comparative to urban centers. The other thing is opportunities for for entertainment, for for stuff, to have fun and to enjoy yourself, basically. Recreational facilities, okay? There are very few in the urban area, in the rural areas. People get bored. You hear about people getting bored, Agriculture, poor agricultural practices that have destroyed the environment, making some of the land and the soils uninhabitable or not useful for growing crops. For example, using too much pesticide in crops, too much pesticide in the soils, and changing the soil nutrient balance. That makes the land not be able to produce what it's usually used to produce before. Okay, so young people are not able to make a living out of agriculture, and that's one of the biggest employers. Agriculture is one of the biggest employers in Africa, and people are having to move now to urban centers. Opportunities for education, opportunities for work. So what happens is that people tend to move and to shift, and that actually creates population variability from the rural area to the urban area. Okay, so what happens is that these governors need to be aware that the population is going to keep changing. And in Kenya, as you see, they say that the maternity hospitals are full of people. They need to do their research again and realize that, in fact, even some schools in some parts of the country have been remaining empty because women are not giving birth. Women are not having children as according to the rates that they used to have before. Okay, there's been quite a shift in household composition and household size. Okay, and in Kenya, and that will definitely affect politics. Who knows, one fine day it might not even be that lucrative to be in politics anymore because our population is going to decline so much. So let's go back to the topic of this discussion, okay, before we go too far. And this is a warning because this is going to be a little bit of a longer vlog, because I want to cover the issue of unemployment, because I know that there are very many people right now who have been affected because they have lost their jobs. Okay, I just wanted to bring into your mind the larger picture, the bigger picture, and to show you that you're not the only one in the country that has lost your job. Actually, the majority of Kenyans, the majority of employable Kenyans are unemployed. The few of you who have lost your jobs are just representatives of those, are part of that group now. Okay, you've gone into that group. Now, I don't want to discourage you. But it's just to let you know that those people who are unemployed are not dead. Yeah? They're still living. Now, it will take a mind shift. It will really take a whole mind shift for you. Because I'm talking to you out of my own experience. Where, for example, I have resigned from a position to go and take up part-time work when I was starting my consultancy business. For example, I made a decision to leave my position and take on a job that really had no, I could not plan for the future, etc. But it's because I really valued my freedom and my independence over reporting to a job 9 to 5. And also because as a single parent, I wanted to be there for my child as much more than I was able to be with this particular full-time position. So I took this leap of faith, with a small contract of just 3 months, and took off, and from there I started working like doubles, triples. Nobody had to tell me to come to work on time. I was working overnight, overtime. Yeah, using the online resources, going, door to door, looking for opportunities, because, I am ruthless when it comes to looking for work. Okay, so it means that I knew I only had myself to depend on. Of course, I could fall back on perhaps parents, okay, but the pride in me. And also I felt to myself, it wasn't their responsibility to be raising my child. It was my responsibility. He's my child. Okay, I have responsibilities. So therefore, I decided to go back and work as hard as possible. Change my whole mindset. Get away from this idea that I'm getting a paycheck at the end of the month. So for you guys who have lost your jobs, I want to encourage you. The first step is accept it. Even if you didn't plan it like me, even if you're not allowed to plan it, accept it and see what you can do to make lemonade out of lemons. Yeah, make lemonade out of the lemons that you've been served. So here's an idea for making up the lemonade. Number one, you can probably negotiate before you actually leave your position. Maybe you have just received your letter telling you of redundancy, telling you, very sorry, but within the next 3 months you're going to be out of a job. And therefore, we're going through, because why we're going through restructuring, or, unfortunately we're laying you off. We're going through restructuring. We are not able to adjust to the inflation currently. The cost of goods and services is too high, and the cost of inputs to our business is too high. So we're going to unfortunately have to render some of you redundant through restructuring. Okay, and we're going to give you some gratuity. We're going to terminate your contract, and unfortunately, you're going to be dismissed. Okay. We're going to lose some of you. We're going to have to discharge some of you and downsize, okay, because we're contracting. All those horrible big fat words you're going to hear from your employers. Let them not faze you. For those of you who have been out of a job for a long time, that also applies to you. If you received your letter a long time ago, that applies to you too, okay? Because I can tell you that with determination, focus, and vision, you'll be very surprised that you can actually take yourself to the next level. You can take yourself to the next level. I tell you, the economies of Kenya, the economies of Africa have never been easy for anyone. They've never been easy. But there are some people who have thrived. Don't allow that certificate of education that you have to deter you or to make you think in a narrow sense in terms of this is the only place where I can get an income. If all you know how to do is to be that engineer, if all you know how to do is to be that engineer, that architect, if that program manager, that secretary, that account manager, executive account manager, why? Because you studied for it. Yeah, it's okay to continue to look for opportunities within your field, but in the meantime, you need to start to supplement your income quickly. Supplement it quick, because every one of us is born with some what we call born intelligence. Each one of us is born with a way to survive in the world. What I did to try to augment my income, okay, when I was out of a job for some time, I started to bake. I'm quite a good baker, and I really improved my baking skills to the point where I became a really good baker. And I would bake overnight, and a cousin of mine would come and decorate the cakes during the day. She used to work near me, and she used to own a bakery. Till today, she bakes from her home, and she has a complete business in baking. And just because other people are out there baking doesn't mean that you don't have an opportunity to also bake, because it all depends on the quality of the work that you do and also the presentability of your work. So that's just one example. So that amount of money was not going to replace the job, but it was going to at least supplement my income to some extent. So it supplemented my income and gave me some money to pay for petrol, to pay, kitchen budget, petrol, basic things like that. We women are, I think, a little bit more adaptable to change than men, because some of the problems I see with guys is that you guys, you want to build castles in the sky. You say, I'm not going to start a mechanic's garage unless I actually have the building with the doors, and I don't know where, and a warehouse, and I'm going to rent it. No, guys, no, that's not how it works. You need to come down to where you are. You can start a garage right, in a very simple way, in a very, very simple and simplistic way. Yeah, you can even decide to have a mobile service that services cars. Okay, you get a car, one of the people, maybe you use your own car, and you get a mechanic, put them in the car with your tools, and become a mobile mechanic. Why not? So there are so many things that one can do. I'm not going to tell you what you can do, because I believe that you all have your capabilities. But this is going to be a series. I don't want this to go too long, because I know that concentration spans are very low generally. But what I'll do is that I'm going to try my best to bring up this topic and discuss this topic every couple of days, research a little bit more. Please ask me any questions that you have. I know I did not answer all your questions, but I gave you the scenario. I painted the scenario for you, okay? And so from here we can move on forward, okay? Identifying solutions for how do we handle the situation where you're made to be redundant and unable to fend for your family. What can you do to give yourself a softer landing? Okay, so anyway, how are you doing? I didn't even greet you nicely. That's kind of rude in Africa, not to greet people, but I want to leave you with this beautiful song, which encouraged me. Every time I was out of a job, I would play this song, and I don't know, it just had a way of comforting me, and I hope that it has comforted you, and I've explained what it means to you. It's about about having hope, and resting Having hope, continuing your hope and resting in the promises of the Creator, and always remembering that there's always shelter in the storm. There's always shelter in the storm, even for you who's a little flower under there. So join me. Thank you so much, new subscribers. Thank you for coming on. I don't take you for granted. I really appreciate it. Please respond. Let's talk. Yes. What it says is, it means darkness became light. You know, the darkness in your life, it will be illuminated. Okay? It's not always going to be dark. Think about the light. Think about the light ahead. Barasheha, Anita, Namoko Wake, Akangua, Namoko Kendaya, Kahurokia, Wendoine Wake. Don't you like that? Huh? There's no song that is complete in Africa without that guitar. Hey! Alright guys, love you, take care. Subscribe, like and share. Ta-da!